Alrighty, YouTube, Niner Empire, what is going down? Welcome back to another video here. So along with Adam Peters, of course, Steve Wilks has also been gaining interest, and I made a video about this a couple days ago. But along with the Chargers and the Raiders requesting permission to interview 49ers defensive coordinator Steve Wilks, the Atlanta Falcons today came out and requested permission to interview him for their vacant head coach position. So obviously it would be the, third team? And I know it's only the second team, so I don't think the Raiders have requested permission to interview Steve Wilks. So it's only been the Chargers and the Atlanta Falcons are the two teams that have came out requesting to interview with him. So obviously when it comes to Steve Wilks, he's a very highly touted, assistant coach in this league. He could have very well, without a doubt, been the Carolina head coach after what happened last year with Matt Rhule leaving. But instead, they go with Frank Reich. The players wanted Steve Wilks, and obviously that blew up in their face. They got that completely wrong. So with Steve Wilks, he's already been a head coach again. I mean, he coached the Cardinals in 2018. There's going to be probably a handful of teams reaching out to the Niners about requesting to interviewing with him or to doing an interview with him. So obviously I would fully expect the Falcons and the Chargers to not only be the two teams reaching out to him. Again, I mean, players love him. He's a player's type of coach. Again, he could have very well been the Carolina head coach last year, but they went with Frank Reich. We obviously know what happened with them going with Frank Reich. But yeah, so again, I mean, Steve Wilks, highly touted assistant in this league. He's being sought out after, which isn't surprising. And I would expect, again, this year for a lot of coordinators and executives and current franchises to, like this year, if you want a promotion and if you want to get a shot leading your own team as a head coach or a GM, now would probably be the year to do so. Like, again, there's no other better year than now, I think, for upcoming coordinators that want to move into head coaching roles and assistant GMs and, player personnel guys leaving to become GMs. Like, everything's on the board. Like, 25% of the league needs to fill roles this year. And with the Atlanta Falcons, I mean, they really haven't had success since Dan Quinn left in 2016. And when Kyle left, and really after the 2016 season, that was kind of like the downfall, I think, for the Atlanta Falcons. So obviously whoever they hire next needs to be the guy to turn that franchise around. And again, I'm not saying Steve Wilks couldn't be a head coach, because I obviously think he's very touted as a defensive coordinator. But if I'm Atlanta, I don't think I'm hiring Steve Wilks. I think I'm getting somebody in there that is an offensive mind that can lead a high-powered offense. And I think Atlanta has a lot of key pieces to do so. Obviously, they're missing a quarterback, but maybe they draft one this year. Maybe Justin Fields goes to the Falcons if the Bears move on from him. We don't know what's going to happen with that. But this year is going to be weird, just in totality. The number of coaches that have been fired over the past 24 hours and or have retired, like Nick Saban. There's a lot of things going on in the football world, and that has been the past couple days. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to look a lot different, too, with like Pete Carroll not being in Seattle. You obviously have Bill Belichick that parted ways with New England today. So the NFL is going to look a lot different next year, a lot different. So I'll be interested to see how things play out. But obviously we know with Steve Wilks, like when we hired him last year, I knew without a doubt, and I'm sure a lot of you guys out there knew as well, but I knew without a doubt that he was going to come to San Francisco, he was going to have success, and then at the end of the year, teams are going to start firing their head coaches and requesting to interview with him. So it's no doubt in my mind, there's no doubt in my mind that Steve Wilks could be a one-year wonder for the Niners here. Or he could say, you know what, screw it. I don't think I want to do that yet. I want to come back to the Niners. I want to gain even more steam. But again, I mean, it just doesn't make sense with all these head coach openings now. It doesn't make sense for Steve Wilks, if he wants to be a head coach, not to leave the Niners this year to go lead a team. I mean, he's got a better opportunity to lead a team now than I think he ever did. And an interesting thing to be on the watch out for here, Steve Wilks could very well return to the Carolina Panthers and coach them, without a doubt. I think, they obviously passed on him last year and hired Frank Reich instead, and I'm sure that probably didn't sit well with Steve Wilks. But Carolina needs a head coaching opening, or a head coach opening, and I think without a doubt they could very well reach out to Steve Wilks again and ask him to lead their team. But again, I don't know. I know up until this point, Brian Callahan, Brian Johnson, all these assistants or coordinators for some of these teams have already, or I guess are already in line to interview for the Carolina Panthers. But with the Panthers, I think they're going to have a lengthy and very well put together. I mean, they have to. They have to have a very lengthy head coaching search. They have to make sure they get the right guy, of course. Some people may not even want to go out there, which is going to be hard for the Panthers. But when it comes to the Panthers, I wouldn't be shocked if they reached out to Steve Wilks. Why not? You should have hired him last year. You didn't. You went with Reich instead. Now, something that's interesting, too, about Steve Wilks is he could very well kind of say, screw you. You guys passed on me last year. You guys hired Frank Reich instead. That blew up in your face. You guys could have easily hired me. That stuff don't... I know it didn't bode well with Steve Wilks, the way that was kind of handled, and really, rightfully so. I don't know how it would be. I don't know how that's fair for Steve Wilks to not get that job. But again, I mean, I get, where Carolina's coming from. They want to have a lengthy search and this and that. But you hired Frank Reich over Steve Wilks. I think everybody would probably prefer Steve Wilks over Frank Reich. But again, just the thought, not saying it could happen, but I definitely wouldn't be shocked if it did. Again, there's familiarity there. The players wanted him last year to be their head coach. They went with Reich. I think, without a doubt, Carolina probably learned from that. They're going to have a lengthy head coaching search, and I think they definitely need an offensive mind. I think that's another thing where you could probably look at that and say, I don't think Steve Wilks is going back to Carolina because he's a defensive-minded coach. Hence why he's the defensive coordinator with the Niners. Carolina needs a young offensive guru, offensive coordinator like Ben Johnson that could come in and help Bryce Young. They got to have somebody that can come in and help a rookie quarterback. So I guess really in a way, I could see Steve Wilks going to Arizona or a team like them over going back to Carolina. It just doesn't make sense. I think Carolina knows they need an offensive mind. They had one in Frank Reich, but they completely screwed that. I think we can all, Frank Reich was never the answer for Carolina. But again, I mean, obviously with the Falcons and the Chargers interviewing Steve Wilks, maybe he gets another opportunity. I could very well see him going to the Atlanta Falcons as well. But we'll see what happens, of course. I mean, there's a lot to be on the lookout for this offseason. Pete Carroll, obviously, he was fired. He is staying with the Seahawks as an advisor, but it's still interesting to see who will fill that role. I have a funny feeling it could be Dan Quinn. Obviously, currently the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys. As far as the Patriots go, Mike Vrabel, Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo is already a coach that they have on their roster. So a lot of different things to kind of watch here going into the offseason. It's going to be wild. This is definitely the start of a new era. There's so many head coaches, so many longtime head coaches that have not retired. I'm thinking about Saban here, but that have been let go by their respected organizations. Pete Carroll, I think, was the most shocking for me. I didn't see why you do that. I think without a doubt Pete Carroll could have came in next year and got them to the playoffs with a new quarterback. But I get it. All good things must come to an end. I'm happy, I guess, as a Niners fan seeing Pete Carroll leave. With Pete Carroll, I think Niners fans all have respect for Pete Carroll. He dominated the 49ers, in the Harbaugh era. It kills me to say that, but he did. He dominated us in the Harbaugh era. He got Seattle to the playoffs a year after they let go of Russell Wilson with Geno Smith. nothing but respect for Pete Carroll. I'm just glad that we don't have to keep up with him and things of that nature. And the Niners have dominated Pete Carroll, over the last 2-3 years. But Pete Carroll's a great head coach. So to me, it's no surprise that they kept him around in the front office in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I mean, Dan Quinn could very well go back, to Seattle. Obviously, he was their defensive coordinator during the Harbaugh era with Seattle. But yeah, man. But yeah, like I said, Falcons requesting permission to interview Steve Wilks again, along with the Chargers. I wouldn't expect this to be the only two teams that reach out to try and interview Steve Wilks. So I would definitely, without a doubt, expect Steve Wilks to leave this year. Obviously, we'll see what happens. I'll tell you this. If there's one guy that I think should lead this defense, if Steve Wilks ends up leaving to take a head coaching role, my guy, and I'm just going to stay in-house here, Chris Kocurek, 49ers defensive line coach, without a doubt is deserving of this defensive coordinator role. One of the main things about Chris Kocurek is he has coached and evolved this defensive line and helped young guys come in. Bosa, he's even helped Eric Armstead. He wasn't with us when we drafted Eric Armstead, but he's had a very he's had a big helping hand and kind of, shaping Eric Armstead, into the type of player he currently is. He's helped a lot of these role players, 49ers defensive linemen, Charles Omenihu in recent memory, Arden Key, DJ Jones, Kevin Givens, and all these rotational defensive linemen that the 49ers have. Chris Kocurek has had a very big hand in developing these guys, and he also kind of he's really known for I think the most developing Ndamukong Suh into the type of player he was. He was with the Lions in 2009. All the way to 2017. He then was obviously the defensive line coach for the Miami Dolphins. So he's only really been a defensive line coach in his NFL career. But without a doubt, I think he's starting to get to the point where I think he can very well call plays for this Niners defense. He's been here since 2019, so he's familiar with this culture. He's a guy that gets fired up on the sidelines as well, like D'Amico did and Saleh did. So I think without a doubt, they should at least interview him for defensive coordinator role. Obviously, if Steve Wilks leaves, but again, we'll see what happens with all these coordinator roles opening up and these head coaching roles. But yeah, so all in all, Steve Wilks officially being sought out after by the Atlanta Falcons to get an interview with them for their head coaching role, along with the LA Chargers. But again, like I said, I wouldn't expect this to be the only two teams to inquire about him. But again, I'll keep you guys updated on all of this. But yeah, as always, go Niners, and I'll see you guys in the next one.